October 20th, 1973 was the night everyone thought the American experiment might actually fail. The night Richard Nixon fired everyone in his path to stop an investigation. But the system held because individuals refused to break. I'm telling you this because at 3:17 p.m. Eastern Time today, the history books just got rewritten and the trajectory of this republic changed forever. Not because of a vote, but because one federal judge decided the Constitution was more than just paper. Judge Tanya Chutkan has done something that has never happened in 249 years of American history. Not during the darkest days of the Civil War, not during Watergate, and not during the previous constitutional crisis that tested our resolve. She did not just issue a ruling or sign an order. She formally referred a former president of the United States to Congress for immediate impeachment, declaring that the judicial branch has exhausted its ability to contain a clear and present danger to the rule of law. This is not a leak from anonymous sources whispering to reporters in a parking garage. This is a 47-page legal document signed, sealed, and delivered explicitly telling the people's representatives that the time for waiting is over and the time for action is right now. The magnitude of this moment cannot be overstated because it represents a collision between the branches of government that the Founding Fathers feared but hoped we would never actually see. When a lifetime appointed federal judge concludes that a defendant has become so defiant, so ungovernable, and so dangerous that the courts can no longer ensure the administration of justice. We have left the realm of normal politics entirely. We are now in a territory where the very machinery of accountability is being tested. And if you care about the survival of this republic, you need to pay attention to every single detail of what just happened. Before we dive deeper into the legal earthquake that just hit Washington, and I want to make sure you are part of this conversation as we navigate these unprecedented times together. Please take a second to comment your thoughts below. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our latest videos as this story develops hour by hour. Let's analyze why this specific referral is so devastating and why it is fundamentally different from everything that has come before in the long saga of Donald Trump's legal battles. Usually, when a defendant ignores a court order, the judge has a standard toolkit, warnings, fines, contempt of court, and eventually revocation of bail to put the defendant in a cell. But Judge Chutkan has been trapped in a constitutional paradox for months, dealing with a defendant who possesses the wealth to ignore fines and the political power to make incarceration a national security nightmare. She has issued warnings that were ignored. She has levied fines that were paid without a second thought. And she has watched as her courtroom was turned into a campaign stage for attacks on the judiciary. This criminal referral is her saying that the judicial branch has hit a wall, that the standard tools of law enforcement are insufficient for a man who commands a political movement and treats court orders as mere suggestions. By sending this directly to Congress, she is effectively handing the baton to the only body left with a constitutional authority to impose a meaningful consequence, the United States Congress. The evidence attached to this referral is not vague, it is not speculative, and it is certainly not open to interpretation by partisan spin doctors who want to dismiss this as just another political attack. We are talking about 14 separate documented violations of court orders, each one backed by time-stamped screenshots and transcripts that leave absolutely no room for doubt. This includes witness intimidation, where the former president publicly targeted the very people called to testify against him, and clear attempts to poison the jury pool before a trial could even begin. But the most damning piece of evidence, the one that is reportedly causing panic even among his staunchest defenders on Capitol Hill, is the existence of recorded conversations. These aren't just public social media posts that can be explained away as free speech or political rhetoric. These are audio recordings of the former president discussing plans to defy court orders with his close advisors. This establishes intent in a way that is almost impossible to defend against in a court of law or the court of public opinion, proving that these violations were calculated, strategic, and deliberate. This is the moment where the rubber meets the road for every member of Congress who swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. If a federal judge presents you with irrefutable proof that the system of justice is being dismantled from the inside, you no longer have the luxury of remaining silent or hiding behind partisan talking points. The question is no longer about whether you like Donald Trump or hate him. The question is whether you believe that court orders apply to everyone, or if there is one man in America who is above the law. If you believe that the rule of law is worth fighting for, help us grow this community by liking this video, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss our latest videos on this unfolding crisis. I think about the precedent this sets for the future of our country. If Congress chooses to look the other way and ignore a formal referral from the federal bench, if we establish a new norm where a powerful political figure can openly mock judges, intimidate witnesses, and coordinate with co-defendants to obstruct justice without any consequence, then the judiciary effectively ceases to function. It sends a message to every future demagogue, every wealthy criminal, and every person with power that the laws are written for the weak, not the strong. Judge Chutkan understood this existential threat, and that is why she escalated this situation, not out of political animus, but out of a desperate need to preserve the integrity of the institution she serves. She realized that her continued tolerance of this behavior was actually damaging the judiciary, making a mockery of the concept of equal justice under the law. Her referral is a plea to the legislative branch to do its job, to use the impeachment power not as a political weapon, but as the ultimate shield for the republic against a president who refuses to be bound by the rules of a civilized society. The reaction in Washington has been swift, chaotic, and indicative of a major shift in the political calculus that has governed the Republican Party for the last decade. For years, the GOP has stood by Trump through scandals that would have ended any other political career. But this time, the ground is shifting beneath their feet because the accuser is not a Democrat, but a federal judge. Moderate Republicans from swing districts, the men and women who have to answer to suburban voters, are looking at this 47-page document and realizing that they cannot defend the indefensible. We are seeing cracks in the dam that held back the previous impeachments, with representatives like Mike Lawler and Don Bacon explicitly stating that their oath to the Constitution supersedes their loyalty to any individual man. When you have lifelong Republicans coming out and saying that obstruction of justice confirmed by a federal judge is a red line they cannot cross, you know that the political winds have changed direction. This is no longer a partisan exercise led by Democrats. It is becoming a bipartisan effort to save the constitutional order from a threat that has grown too large to ignore. This is a critical time for our nation, and we need everyone to stay informed and engaged. So please remember to comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest videos as we track every vote and every development. The political ground shifted beneath the Republican Party in a single afternoon, but it was Donald Trump's response that turned a constitutional crisis into a national security emergency. Since yesterday afternoon, the former president has been posting constantly on Truth Social, launching all caps tier about rigged courts and deep state conspiracies that we have seen 1,000 times before. But then, in a moment that silenced war rooms across Washington, he posted a message that set off alarm bells at the highest levels of law enforcement and intelligence. He explicitly wrote that if Congress moves forward with this witch hunt, patriots must converge on Washington because the Second Amendment exists for moments like this. Read those words again and understand that a former president of the United States just openly called for armed resistance against the legislative branch of his own government. This is not campaign rhetoric. This is not political posturing. And this is not a metaphor that can be spun by cable news pundits tomorrow morning. Law enforcement is treating this post as a credible imminent threat because they understand that in the current climate, these words are interpreted by some followers as operational orders. By posting this, Trump has essentially made the prosecution's argument for them in real time, providing fresh evidence of his willingness to incite chaos to protect his own power. Every escalation on social media strengthens the case against him, proving that the danger Judge Chutkan warned about is not theoretical, but active and ongoing. Washington, D.C. has responded accordingly, transforming the capital of the free world into a fortress that looks more like a war zone than the seat of a democracy. National Guard units are currently deploying across the Capitol complex. Steel barricades are rising around federal buildings, and armed security is visible at every single entrance and checkpoint. This is the reality of the situation on the ground. And it is crucial that we document this moment together as a community of concerned citizens. Please make sure to comment your thoughts on these developments. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest videos. Reporting from the front lines of this crisis, the atmosphere in the city is tense, heavy with the memory of January 6th. But this time, the authorities are determined not to be caught off guard by a mob. Helicopters are patrolling the skies. Armored vehicles are stationed at key intersections, and sharpshooters have taken positions on rooftops overlooking the National Mall. This is what the capital of the United States looks like right now, not because of a foreign invasion or a terrorist plot, but because a former president is facing accountability and has chosen to burn down the House rather than face the music. Most of the news coverage you see right now is focused entirely on the impeachment vote count, asking whether enough Republicans will defect or what will happen in the Senate trial. Those are important questions, but they are missing the much larger and more dangerous picture that is forming behind the scenes at the Department of Justice. Judge Chutan's referral did not just go to Congress. The evidence of witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and criminal contempt has also been forwarded to federal prosecutors. This means we are no longer looking at just a political process involving votes and speeches, but a parallel criminal investigation that carries the threat of significant prison time. If federal prosecutors establish that Trump directly coordinated with witnesses to influence their testimony, that constitutes subnation of perjury, which is a serious federal offense. We could very well see a scenario where new criminal indictments arrive while the Senate impeachment proceedings are still underway, creating a legal storm unlike anything in history. Imagine the collision of a Senate trial determining his political future, running simultaneously with a federal grand jury handing down charges that could determine his personal freedom. The legislative branch and the judicial branch are operating on parallel tracks, multiple accountability mechanisms moving at once to constrain a leader who refuses to follow the rules. This is the constitutional territory the framers of our government anticipated might one day be necessary, but they hoped with all their hearts would never actually be tested. There is another layer to this crisis that is barely being discussed publicly, but is consuming private conversations in the corridors of power. The 25th Amendment reports indicate that quiet, urgent conversations have already begun regarding the possibility of removing the president without impeachment if he is deemed unable to discharge his duties. The 25th Amendment allows for a swift removal if the vice president and a majority of the cabinet conclude that the commander-in-chief poses an immediate danger to the republic. While I am not predicting that this extreme measure will definitely be invoked, the mere fact that it is being discussed tells you how severe officials believe this situation has become. It signals that even within his own circle, or at least among those responsible for the continuity of government, there is a recognition that the president's behavior has crossed a line into instability. This discussion is historically significant because it shows that the guardrails are straining under the pressure, and the people inside the room are looking for the emergency brake. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is fracturing in real time, splitting into two distinct camps that can no longer coexist within the same political coalition. You have the loyalists like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz doubling down, calling for protests and attacking any Republican who dares to break ranks as a traitor to the movement. And then you have the pragmatists, the lawmakers, who are looking at the evidence, looking at the 2026 midterms, and realizing that tying their fate to a sinking ship is political suicide. Internal threats are escalating as lawmakers who have signaled they might vote for impeachment are facing harassment. Their staffs are being threatened and their families are being targeted online. The party itself is tearing apart in public. And with the midterm elections just 10 months away, many Republicans see an electoral catastrophe looming if they remain paralyzed by chaos. They are calculating their exit strategies, hedging their bets, and preparing for a post-Trump world because they know that political coalitions do not collapse gradually. They collapse suddenly and all at once. If you are finding this analysis helpful in understanding the chaos, please help us out by commenting below, subscribing to our channel, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss our latest videos breaking down the news. Internationally, the consequences of this domestic turmoil are already visible and deeply concerning to our allies who rely on American stability. A former American president threatening armed resistance while facing his third impeachment is not a normal headline in London, Tokyo, or Berlin. Our allies are alarmed, burning up the phone lines to the State Department, holding emergency meetings, and wondering if the United States can still be trusted to lead the free world. Our adversaries are watching closely, too, assessing the instability in Washington, probing for weakness, and looking for opportunities to exploit our distraction for their own gain. Domestic turmoil in the United States always carries global consequences because when America is consumed by internal conflict, dictators and autocrats feel emboldened to push boundaries. Right now, to the rest of the world, the United States looks deeply, profoundly unstable. And that perception alone makes the world a more dangerous place. Let's talk about what this means for ordinary people. Not the politicians or the lawyers, but regular Americans trying to live their lives and protect their families. The economy hates uncertainty, and there is nothing more uncertain than a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time with threats of violence in the Capitol. Futures markets are already reacting to the news. International investors are watching wearily, and the stability of the dollar is being tested by the chaos in our government. When the world's largest economy looks politically unstable, money moves to safer havens. Interest rates can shift unpredictably and supply chains can tighten overnight. None of this is guaranteed to happen, but all of it becomes significantly more likely when the political system is consumed by a crisis of this magnitude. This is the hidden cost of political extremism. It is not just about angry tweets or cable news drama. It eventually hits your 401k, your mortgage rates, and the price of goods at the grocery store. Beyond the immediate panic of the markets and the political maneuvering in the Capitol, there is a deeper, more insidious cost to this crisis that we have to talk about: the erosion of trust. How do you explain to your children what is happening when they see news footage of National Guard troops surrounding the seat of American democracy and a former president calling for armed resistance against the government? This is the kind of institutional damage that is incredibly hard to repair because it shatters the fundamental belief that our system works and that disagreements can be resolved through process rather than force. Every generation of Americans eventually faces a moment where they have to decide whether the Constitution is just ink on parchment or a living set of rules that actually constrains power. We are living through one of those defining moments right now, this very week. And the choices made in the next few days will determine the character of this nation for decades. Safety is no longer an abstract concept for the people living and working in Washington, D.C., where the memory of January 6th has transformed from history into an operational reality for law enforcement. Agencies are not deploying the National Guard as a mere precaution. They are deploying soldiers because they have intelligence suggesting the threat is real, imminent, and potentially violent. They watched a mob attack the Capitol once before. They watched officers beaten with flagpoles. And they are absolutely determined that they will not be caught off guard a second time. For the thousands of federal employees, Capitol staff, and families living near government buildings, the next 72 hours will be filled with tension, security checkpoints, and the constant drone of helicopters overhead. That is the human reality of a constitutional crisis. It is not just drama for cable news ratings. It is real people canceling plans and wondering if their commute is safe. Whatever happens when the House votes on Monday, the political landscape of the United States has been permanently altered, and there is simply no path back to the way things were before. If Donald Trump is impeached for a third time, he cements his legacy as a historical figure, defined not by his policy accomplishments, but by repeated, unprecedented accountability proceedings. Even if he is somehow acquitted in the Senate, he remains legally exposed, with federal criminal cases continuing regardless of what Congress decides, ensuring the next few years are consumed by trials. There is no back to normal from here, only a turbulent march forward through a series of unprecedented legal and political gauntlets that will test every institution we have. Let's lay out exactly what the next few weeks could look like, not as idle predictions, but as genuine possibilities based on the hard facts we know right now. Scenario 1 is the nuclear option. Impeachment passes the House and the Senate actually votes to convict, effectively ending the Trump era once and for all. This path requires all Democrats plus at least 18 Republicans in the Senate to break ranks, which is a historically high bar to clear in today's polarized environment. However, it is not impossible, especially if more damaging evidence emerges during a Senate trial or if the former president continues to escalate his rhetoric to dangerous new levels. If conviction happens, Trump would be permanently barred from holding federal office again. His political career would be constitutionally terminated, and the Republican Party would be forced to rebuild from the ashes. Scenario 2 is perhaps the most likely outcome based on historical patterns. The House impeaches, but the Senate acquits because they cannot reach the two-thirds majority required for conviction. In this scenario, Trump survives legally, but is severely weakened politically, carrying the stain of a third impeachment and the public revelation of damning evidence. The evidence presented during the trial becomes a permanent public record, and every Republican senator who votes to acquit will have to defend that vote in every future campaign they run. Scenario 3 involves the 25th Amendment, a path that would be faster than a Senate trial and could happen overnight if the situation deteriorates rapidly. This requires Vice President Vance and a majority of the cabinet to conclude that the president is unfit to discharge his duties, a move that would be viewed as the ultimate betrayal by Trump loyalists. The fact that this option is even being discussed in whispered tones shows just how unstable the situation is perceived to be by the very people inside the government who know him best. Scenario 4 is the wild card. Additional criminal indictments arrive from the Department of Justice, independent of whatever Congress is doing with impeachment. Federal prosecutors are continuing their work, and new charges for witness tampering or obstruction could arrive at any time, creating a double jeopardy of political and criminal liability. This would create the unprecedented situation of a former president facing active criminal prosecution in federal court, while simultaneously undergoing congressional impeachment proceedings in the Senate. None of these scenarios are mutually exclusive, and several could happen simultaneously, converging to create a perfect storm of legal and political pressure that no individual could easily withstand. Trump is not facing one single threat. He is facing multiple converging threats from the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the criminal justice system all at once. So where does that leave us? As we watch history unfold in real time, waiting to see if the center can hold, you need to remember that a federal judge has formally referred criminal conduct to Congress for the first time in history. And this is not a partisan game. The House is virtually certain to vote for impeachment by Monday, with over 231 co-sponsors already committed, making the only question the margin of the vote. This is bigger than just impeachment. This is about a major political party coming apart at the seams and a last urgent effort to impose accountability before the window closes. If you want to see how this chapter of history unfolds and support our coverage of these pivotal events, be sure to comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. I've covered American politics for a long time. I've seen crises, scandals, and moments when it felt like the system might fail altogether, but this feels different. Not because the outcome is guaranteed, it isn't. And not because we know the good guys will prevail, we don't. It feels different because the mechanisms of accountability, the slow grinding gears the founders built into the system centuries ago, are actually moving. A judge encountered conduct she could not accept, and she acted. Members of Congress are confronting evidence they can no longer dismiss, and they are responding. The Constitution, that 237-year-old document, is being tested in real time. And together, we're about to find out whether it still has the power to protect us and to hold.